Hey guys, Fletch Observer here, and today's video is going to be a Premier League review show reviewing Game 7 of the 2019-2020 season. This round of fixtures threw up some encounters that had a lot of goals and some interesting results, and I'm going to review them all in this video. So without further ado, let's begin. We're going to begin with Monday night's fixture, in which Arsenal travelled to Manchester and Old Trafford to take on Manchester United in a game that ended as a 1-1 draw. It was a first half of few chances, but the deadlock was eventually broken on the stroke of half time. A United counter-attack was finished when Marcus Rashford teed up Scott McTominay on the edge of the penalty area, and the midfielder fired past Bernd Leno in the Arsenal goal and into the back of the net to put the Red Devils ahead. However, Arsenal were level just before the hour mark. A loose pass by Axel Tuanzebe allowed Bukayo Saka to play through at Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and the Gabon striker made no mistake in beating David De Gea. However, there was a slight scare when originally the goal was ruled out by the linesman for offside, but thanks to VAR, the goal was allowed to stand and Aubameyang's 7th goal of the season counted, and as it turned out, it was the goal that rescued a point and forced both clubs to share the spoils come the final whistle. This is clearly not the result that either side would have wanted, and to be honest, it wasn't the high level of performances we're used to seeing from these two sides when they clash, and it was again rather overhyped and disappointing. Also, quick shout out to the linesman who originally flagged off Aubameyang's goal. His name escapes me, but if you watch the goal back, Harry Maguire, who's playing Aubameyang onside, is pretty much still right in front of him, and yet he doesn't see him and still raises his flag. Maybe if VAR wasn't in the game, that would have stood, as decisions like that used to happen at Old Trafford for United in the years gone by. Both sides have Europa League action this week and will want to get back to winning ways there, and in their next league game, with United facing Newcastle on Sunday, whilst on the same day Arsenal host Bournemouth at the Emirates. Next, we come to a game that featured a goalkeeping mistake that allowed Liverpool to maintain their perfect start to the season after coming through a tough test away at Sheffield United, as the Reds scraped through with a 1-0 victory at Bramall Lane. The only goal of the game came in the second half when Gini Wijnaldum's volley squirmed its way underneath the Sheffield United goalkeeper Dean Henderson and crossed the line, a goal that later proved to be the decisive factor in this fixture. Henderson did make up for it minutes later when he saved from Mohamed Salah after the Egyptian winger was put through one-on-one on goal, but in the end, despite a brave and valiant effort from the Blades, they fall to their third defeat of the season. It was an incredible effort by Sheffield United. Many people possibly thought that Liverpool were going to give them a right hammering here, but they contested everything, and if they possibly had a bit more of a cutting edge and a bit more composure in key attacking areas, they possibly could have got something from this game. The mistake was cruel and very harsh on them, but they can take away a lot of positives in this game. As for Liverpool, they were clearly below par, but you have to give full credit to United for making them look that way. And it may have had a lot of luck within it, but once again they found a way to keep on winning and remain perfect because of it. Sheffield United will look to bounce back next week when they face Watford, whilst Liverpool will have Champions League commitments to look forward to midweek before a tough test against Leicester quickly follows. Manchester City, though, they maintain their distance behind Liverpool at the top of the league despite Everton's tough test at Goodison Park. City took the lead with 24 minutes on the clock when Gabriel Jesus headed home Kevin De Bruyne's cross. However, Everton equalised shortly after the half-hour mark when Dominic Calvert-Lewin got the final touch on Seamus Coleman's goal-bound dink over Ederson to steal his goal. City were eventually back out in front in the second half when Riyad Mahrez's driven free kick found the back of the net, and then with 5 minutes to go, Raheem Sterling put the game to bed when his strike cannoned off the underside of the crossbar and over the line, which was only confirmed via goal line technology, as City took all 3 points. This result now means that Everton have lost 3 consecutive league games on the bounce, and whilst it doesn't make for pleasant reading, the performance was at least a little more encouraging than in the past. They tested City on a number of occasions, and with a bit more of a killer instinct up front, possibly could have came away with something from this game, but it wasn't to be. The pressure Marco Silva faces won't hurt him as much this week, but they need to carry this kind of performance into future games. As for City, they didn't fall even further behind Liverpool, but they're clearly struggling defensively. Opposition teams are starting to work out the defensive vulnerabilities of this team, and Pep Guardiola needs to sort this out as soon as possible. Everton face an away trip to Burnley in their next league game, while City have Champions League football this week and then face Wolves on Sunday at the Etihad. A 5-star Leicester performance is the subject of our next game, as the Foxes came out 5-0 winners against a Newcastle side who played the second half with only 10 men. Leicester broke the deadlock on the quarter-hour mark when Ricardo Pereira fired home from the edge of the penalty area. Things got even worse for Newcastle close to half-time when Isaac Hayden was sent off for a poor challenge on Dennis Praet, and there, following the interval, Leicester took full control. First, Jamie Vardy doubled the Foxes' lead when he fired past Martin Dubravka, and minutes later Leicester scored their third goal of the afternoon when Dennis Praet's shot deflected in off of Paul Dummett, a goal that was given as an own goal by the Magpies defender. Vardy went on to score his second in the afternoon, heading home Mark Albrighton's cross before Wilfred Ndidi rounded off the performance when he got a goal himself as Leicester returned to third in the table. To simply put it, it was a perfect performance by Leicester. Yes, they were held by the sending off, but their defending was strong and resolute, and their attacking was sharp and dangerous, and that was even without James Maddison, who wasn't quite fit enough to play a part in this game. They keep going about their business slightly under the radar, but I think more and more people are beginning to wake up and realise that they are a genuine contender to, at the very least, break into that top 6, and maybe at a push, contest top 4. As for Newcastle, a dreadful performance. Simply put, they'll be wanting to put this result behind them and move on as soon as possible. Next week, Leicester face a tough challenge when they travel to Liverpool, whilst Newcastle travel to Old Trafford to take on Manchester United. Our next game featured a goal in each half, as that was enough for Crystal Palace to claim all 3 points at Selhurst Park against a Norwich side who had now suffered back-to-back losses in the Premier League. Palace took the lead from the penalty spot after Ibrahim Amadou had brought down James McArthur, and from the resulting spot kick, Luka Milivojevic fired home from 12 yards. Both sides then had chances throughout the game to change the scoreline, however neither side were clinical enough in taking them until the final minutes of the game, when Wilfred Zaha found Andros Townsend in the penalty area, and his strike found the bottom corner to double Palace's lead and put the game to bed in the process. Obviously a great win for Palace here as they continue to gain more points, climb the table, and perhaps surprise people with how well they've done so far in this campaign. They'll look to make it back-to-back wins next week when they take on West Ham in Saturday's evening fixture. Whilst Norwich have now suffered back-to-back losses and haven't even scored a single goal in either of those defeats. It's a little worrying that if Timu Pukki doesn't score, I don't really see anybody else who's going to chip in with goals, if he's not firing all cylinders, that is. The Canaries will look to bounce back next week when they take on Aston Villa at Carrow Road. Next, we're at the Vitality Stadium as Bournemouth hosted West Ham as the two teams played out a 2-2 draw. The Hammers took the lead 10 minutes into the game with Andrei Yarmolenko, who turned and curled a shot into the back of the net from inside the penalty area. Bournemouth soon equalised, however, when the ball fell to Josh King following a Bournemouth corner, and he finished well, but it was originally ruled out by the referee for offside, but when VAR got involved, it overturned the decision to let the goal stand, and it's significant because this is the first time this season that VAR had actually overturned an on-field referee decision. The Cherries then went ahead seconds after the interval. King again involved as he teed up Callum Wilson, and the England striker drilled home his 4th goal in 4 consecutive games. Bournemouth thought they'd added a third when Nathan Ake fired in from a corner. The offside flag though was up against Dominic Solanke, who was seen to be stood in an offside position, obscuring the goalkeeper's view. And then, as a little bit of a sucker punch for Eddie Howe's side, later on in the half, it was West Ham's turn to equalise through Aaron Creswell, who latched onto a Felipe Anderson knockdown, and his deflected strike found the back of the net. A goal that later proved that with neither side able to break the deadlock afterwards, his goal rescued a point for West Ham, and both sides were forced to share the spoils. Decent game of football this one, really could have gone either way. Both sides have some good attacking players with skill and flair, and these are definitely two teams who have the potential to break into that top 6. Although whether they can maintain a level of consistency throughout the season at key points is something of a different question. This makes it 3 games unbeaten for Bournemouth, whilst the results now stretches West Ham's unbeaten run to 6 games. For Bournemouth now, they turn their attention to their next game at the Emirates next Sunday when they clash with Arsenal, whilst West Ham are back in action Saturday evening when they take on Crystal Palace. Our next game saw 10-men Spurs bounce back from last week's defeat to beat Southampton 2-1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Spurs broke the deadlock midway through the first half when Heung-min Son teed up Tanguy Ndombele for the mid-French midfielder to fire home. 5 minutes later though, Tottenham were reduced to 10 men when Serge Aurier got sent off for a second bookable offence, and it wasn't long after that Southampton took full advantage, but Spurs again shot themselves in the foot for the Saints to equalise. Hugo Lloris took too much time with the ball at his feet and ended up losing control of it as Danny Ings pounced and poked the ball home. However, the 10 men of Spurs restored their lead later in the first half when Harry Kane fired into the back of the net following a nice flowing move by the home side, and from there the 10 men held out and claimed all 3 points. This wasn't entirely convincing by Tottenham, but they managed to get the job done nonetheless, and after the poor week they've had, they really needed the win here. The red card was a little harsh upon reflection, but Spurs managed to adapt and hold out. And as for Southampton, they were probably feeling fortunate not to have possibly got something from this game, but once again, they simply are not clinical enough. They scored through an embarrassing error by Hugo Lloris, but other than that, scoring goals is becoming a bit of an issue for this team, and it needs to be sorted out as soon as possible. Tottenham take on Brighton in their next league game after facing Bayern Munich in the Champions League this week, while Southampton host Chelsea on Sunday. Our next game brings us to Wolves, who claim their first victory of the season and in the process heaped more misery onto Watford as they won 2-0 at Molineux. Wolves opened the scoring on 18 minutes when Matt Doherty fired home Pedro Neto's cross, and then just after the hour mark, Wolves doubled their lead. Doherty again involved as his cross was met by Morgan Gibbs-White, whose flicked on header was unintentionally headed into his own goal by Daryl Janmaat, as Wolves went on to secure the victory and all 3 points. This clearly was a much better performance and result by Wolves. There were shades of last season within this performance, but it has to be said that this was against a very poor Watford side. So now it's whether they can maintain this level of performance going forward, and even more so for next week, as of course they're back in Europa League action during the midweek period. As for Watford, it doesn't look very good for them at all right now. Still no win, their defence looks a shambles, and they have some pretty tough fixtures coming up. Things seriously need to pick up soon for the Hornets. As mentioned, Wolves have Europa League commitments this week before taking on Manchester City next Sunday, whilst Watford take on Sheffield United. And now we come to our penultimate game, in which Aston Villa and Burnley were forced to share the spoils at Villa Park following a 2-2 draw between both clubs. Villa thought they had taken the lead on 25 minutes when John McGinn turned home Conor Hourihane's cross. However, the goal was ruled out after it was revealed that Hourihane was offside. Despite the slight setback though, Villa did manage to take the lead not long afterwards, and this time it was allowed to stand. Frederick Gilbert's cross was met by Anwar El Ghazi, and his fine finish drew first blood for the home side. Midway through the second half though, Burnley equalised through Jay Rodriguez's header. 10 minutes later, Villa restored their lead when McGinn's sweetly struck volley found its way into the back of the net, and there was no taking this goal from him. However, their lead didn't last too long, as mere minutes later, Burnley were once again back on level terms. Matt Lowton's cross was headed home by Chris Wood as both sides were forced to settle for a point apiece. Once again, Villa fall at the last. They're quite a good team until it hits the final 10-20 minutes or so, and then they just let it slip. It's very unfortunate for them, but it is what it is, and they need to find a way to sort out this issue going forward. As for Burnley, not a great performance, but they managed to take something from the game. Once again, the inconsistency of Burnley strikes a little bit, but they're still got fairly favourable fixtures on the horizon. So for their next game, Villa travel to Carrow Road to take on Norwich, whilst Burnley head back to Turf Moor where they will entertain Everton. And in our final game, 2 second half Chelsea goals were enough for the Blues to secure their 3rd win of the season against Brighton at Stamford Bridge. Following the first half in which the Blues had the better of the chances, it wasn't until 5 minutes after the restart that Frank Lampard's side eventually took the lead, with a huge helping hand from the away side. Mason Mount pounced on a heavy touch by Adam Webster inside his own penalty area, and the Brighton man ended up bringing down Mount in an attempt to retrieve the ball, resulting in the referee awarding a penalty to the Blues. Jorginho stepped up and converted from 12 yards. Chelsea then went on to double their lead with 15 minutes remaining when Willian's deflected strike found the back of the net, and from there Chelsea saw out the game to not only record their first clean sheet of the season but also their first home win of the campaign as well. Quite clearly a great result for Chelsea and a clean sheet to boot, leaving Frank Lampard a very happy man right now. You can begin to see how he's putting his stamp on this Chelsea side, but it will be interesting to see going forward if they can maintain a level of consistency, especially considering they have some relatively favourable fixtures coming up. As for Brighton, another loss on the board and no win since the beginning of the season, and simply put, not clinical enough to their attacking play. Alarm bells should be ringing for Brighton, as it doesn't seem or look great right now. The Blues travel to France this week to face Lille in Champions League action before taking on Southampton on Sunday, whilst Brighton face Tottenham in Saturday's lunchtime kickoff. And that wraps up the Premier League review show for Game 7 of the 2019-2020 season. Guys, if you have any thoughts or comments on any of the round's results or any of the round's biggest talking points, then I'd love to read them in the comments section below. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things would be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch, the Football Observer. This has been another Premier League review show, and I will see and speak with you all again soon in another video.